This is Cybersound, your simplified and fundamentals-focused source for all things cybersecurity, with your hosts, Jason Pufall and Stephen Maresca.
Welcome to Cybersound. I'm Jason Pufall, and as always, joined by Steve Maresca and Matt Fasaro. Hey, guys.
Happy holidays.
Hi there.
So we have big news today because we can finally announce that we have Santa Claus as a client.
Woo!
I mean, who can say that, really?
The big man.
The big man. And you know, he's concerned about data privacy and data protection, as you would think, because he's got this huge list that he's collected, right? And he wants to make sure it's available because he has to check it twice every year.
And you got to keep it under wraps, I imagine.
And he has to keep it on, let's face it, right? There's huge amounts of PII. He knows where everybody lives, right? He's got data on your behavior, right? All kinds of stuff. So he's really concerned about it.
Private correspondence too, right? I mean, there are lots of letters that are very revealing, I think.
Right. So, you know, our job,
the North Pole has turned into the data lake.
Indeed, right? So is it unfrozen now?
It might be.
Yeah, I think it is. So, you know, Santa, though, he's jumped into the 21st century. We all know that. He clearly knows when you're sleeping and when you're awake, right? I mean, it's something he's been concerned about for a long time. He's put a lot of effort into collecting that data. I'm curious to know how we actually get to that. Do you guys have any insight in that at all?
Well, you know, the elves have a health and wellness division now. They make the sleep number beds. So, you know, they know exactly when you're sleeping, whether you're uncomfortable, whether you're hot, whether you're cold. It, you know, makes sense. They know when you're sleeping.
So are they tracking that somewhere, though, or where's that data go?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it?
It is.
You know, we'd like to think we know where that stuff goes and that it stays on your phone or at least within that company, but we know that's probably not 100% true. And, you know, I'm not a lawyer, so I haven't read all the terms and conditions that the elves have been writing.
I have to assume the North Pole is really good for, you know, cooling data centers. So probably Facebook is co-located with them, most likely.
That could be. So, you know, the sleep number is one, and we clearly know they manufacture that. Wearables, I think, are another issue, right? I mean, so even if you're not tracked by one of their beds, you know, you probably got your Fitbit on. You might have your Google Watch, right? Yeah. Whatever it is.
Right, and Fitbit had a breach, you know, a couple months back, a year ago. I don't recall what it was. And, you know, some of the elves aren't exactly scrupulous. They get their data where they can. So I'm sure they take it from breaches if they have it.
Are there bad elves?
Who knows? They're data experts.
Can't trust the elves at all, it sounds like to me. But they must have a sharing agreement with Santa. I mean, that's obviously got to be built in.
Right.
Clearly.
Right.
Part of the privacy policy that you didn't actually read but agreed to.
The onus is the onus of good behavior is on the gift recipients, not necessarily the gift manufacturers.
That's totally reasonable.
So do we get more presents if we've had more steps? Is that what happens now?
It could be.
Wow. I gotta work on that.
You do. Well, so Santa also knows if you've been bad or good, right? I mean, that's one of the things that everybody's always concerned about, right? Throughout the entire year, he's monitoring your behavior, trying to validate, you know, does he give you something? Does he not? Do you get coal? Although, I mean, coal's probably out of fashion nowadays, a hair. How does he know that? You know, because he can't be monitoring you all the time, can he?
Well, I mean, I suppose it depends. Alexa's on all the time listening to you. If you're having an argument with your sister or your brother, clearly, you know, if you tell your mom a lie later on, Alexa knew.
Alexa does know. So all that data, again, sent up to Santa?
Yeah. I mean, it's the all year round elf on the shelf.
The all year round elf on the So the reality is, though, everybody wants to be a partner with Santa, right? Because there's a lot to be had. But from a logo standpoint, if you can put Santa Claus or North Pole on you, right? So
absolutely. I mean, Reuters just had an article the other day about a Virginia lawmaker who requested all their data. They're absolutely listening to those conversations.
So how much do we worry about web search history, for example? You know, the reality is, right, he's trying to figure out if you're good or bad. I'm not sure everybody always searches for the best things.
Well, I mean, Google is free as a product. We all use it. But it's only free because you're the product. They're a marketing company. They're an advertising company. They're not a search company.
Yeah, that's important to remember, right? If you're not, I mean, even if you are paying a fee for some of these services, right, they're still going to monetize the data that they're getting out of you because, you know, that's part of their streams of data of revenue. that they want to keep.
It's about shareholder value.
Yeah.
Right, for sure. So
Yep.
all right. So he's probably monitoring where you're going virtually. I mean, I know for me at least, I use Google Maps. I think a lot of people use Apple Maps. I imagine he probably gets a sense of where you're going physically, right? So if you're going somewhere you shouldn't,
Oh yeah.
right, memorize those directions and leave your phone at home. It sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking for recommendations and you don't want Santa to know where you've been, turn the GPS off if you don't need it, Wi-Fi off if you don't need it, right?
We're getting into a Santa avoidance discussion here. I don't know if that's quite right.
I think that comes at the tail end of this, right? Because I'm getting more and more nervous that Santa seems to know an awful lot about me through all these relationships he has with some of these tech companies. I mean, it's clear there's a lot of data out there.
Well, I mean, what Santa doesn't know doesn't hurt him, right?
Well, so you can't shout and you can't pout. Like Santa hates that, right? I think we've learned about that for a long time. I know I'm always careful to be smiling on any picture I get. So if it's posted to Facebook or to Instagram, right? The only thing you see are sort of positive sentiment from me on social media. Any other things you need to think about with regards to that? Like, you don't want to see, you don't want him to know you're pouting or that you're unhappy in any way, right?
Yeah. I mean, even what you're typing, right? Maybe just not the pictures, but what you're typing.
Right.
There's plenty of sentiment. That
Autocomplete's a thing.
Yep.
Corrections in your text messages and so forth. I mean, it makes sense, really. Sentiment analysis is a real thing. It's useful. It gets you what you're interested in seeing, most likely.
Right.
Algorithms that benefit you from a consumer standpoint end up helping Santa too.
So his job's gotten a lot easier, right? With our willingness to opt into a lot of these services, which provide a lot of day-to-day value, but I think gives Santa an incredible amount of data to put into his data lake, right?
Mm-hmm. He's much more efficient now.
Much more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So
he's
the great
paperless.
Thing, so let's think about this a little bit from a positive side, though, right? It is great that he has real clarity on what he should bring each and every person. The days of questioning what the gift should be are largely gone because you're typing in all the time, what you might be interested in, and you're getting served ads, and Santa knows about all that.
And parents also benefit from that relationship too, because what their kids are looking up on the computer probably show up in the Facebook feed or Instagram feed for mom or dad. So it goes both ways.
It does. It's interesting. Do kids even need to write a letter to Santa anymore? Or does he just know all the information already?
Well, it is a courtesy and a formality, and I think that it's part of the way you get on the nice list and stay off the naughty list.
So
I think
there's communications.
There's a weighting factor used somewhere by Santa.
That's fair. That's reasonable. So you touched a little bit earlier already on. Listen, let's say you do want to misbehave a little bit over the year, right? Because we all do, and you don't want a lump of coal necessarily. I certainly don't want a lump of coal. How do you avoid a little bit of that? I mean, I agree 100%, right? Turn off, maybe find my iPhone. Don't use the GPS all the time. Like, don't make yourself quite as trackable. I think if you can limit some of the data that Santa gets, it's probably in your best interest.
Well, it's like anything else. If you have home security cameras, don't connect them to the internet. The elves can see you, so can the bad guys. You know what I mean? It's just about being cautious about the data that you produce and what you reveal to others.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is whether you actually need to be sacrificing the convenience factor, right? Most of the time, these things need to be connected because you want to be able to check your camera from wherever you might be if you're not home. Do you need to do that, right? So kind of keeping that in mind.
I really like to start my coffee pot while I'm still in bed, Matt. I mean,
you mean your cocoa maker, right?
Of course.
You're right. But what Santa knows, the second you push that button, though, that you're awake, right? And
That's
so
true.
I personally don't really wear any kind of wearable to bed. I don't think it's that valuable to know whether I slept for 4 hours or 6 hours. I know I'm nowhere ever near 8 hours, but I don't know that Santa really needs to know exactly when I'm going to bed. Let him infer. Let him just assume that I'm doing the right thing. And then, one other useful tip I think is hit the mute button on your Alexa or hit the mute button on your Google Home Assistant, whatever that is. Again, he doesn't need to hear you shouting with your siblings or maybe arguing with your wife. I personally don't ever do that, but maybe somebody else does.
And, we're going to talk in a second about turning the tables on Santa and figuring out where he is. But, if you really want to make sure that the perception of you is positive, you might use those devices to cultivate a positive perception of your activity.
Turn them on when you're happy and everything's going. When you're making your gingerbread cookies to lay out for Christmas Eve, turn on your Alexa, right? That's good information. So how do we turn the tables on him? 'Cause I agree, right? I feel like he's got a leg up on us right now, right? He's got real clarity on how we're behaving, how we're sleeping. Probably more data on how we're sleeping than I want.
Well, so the trouble is that contrary to some propaganda we've seen in some films, Santa has never actually developed stealth technology. So we know where he is traveling at any point in time.
That's fair. So, but what does that give us? So just because you're literally now you behaved for 364 days a year, and all of a sudden at the 11th hour, you have a perspective on where he is in the world. Is there a Hail Mary you can throw right at the end of Christmas Eve and actually behave properly? I guess that's what we're counting on, right?
Well, you use NORAD Santa to at least know when he's arriving to deliver the cookie by hand.
And you better be in bed at that time.
That too, yeah.
Right? I mean, that only makes sense. So I think we've learned a lot about how Santa uses data in the 21st century. Keep an eye under your tree. That'll be your gauge for whether you've been naughty or nice this year. I'd just like to say happy holidays and happy new year to all our listeners. And thank you to Steve and Matt for joining me on this podcast adventure over the last year. If anybody wants to know more about Santa and the way he tracks you, feel free to reach out to us at Vancord on LinkedIn or Vancord Security on Twitter. And with that, happy holidays, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Stay vigilant. Stay resilient. This has been Cyber Sound.